This is Advancing Allies, and I am Julie Shea here for Heart Rhythm TV. And our topic for this episode is on ICD support groups. And I'm very excited to have an esteemed faculty with me this evening to discuss all things ICD support group. We have Dr. Sam Sears, who is a professor of psychological and cardiovascular sciences at East Carolina University in North Carolina. And Sam, I think, is considered the world's leading expert on ICD shock, as well as the psychological concerns of ICD patients, and has probably participated in hundreds of support groups around the globe. We also have Kirkness, who is a clinical nurse consultant in cardiac rehabilitation at the Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney, Australia. And we also have Tiffany Andrade, who is a senior physician assistant at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. So welcome, team. Thanks for joining me.
Hello there.
Yes, thank you.
Super excited. Anne, thank you for joining us from down under. It's actually tomorrow where you are.
Yeah, it is. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you all for joining me this evening. So, Anne, like you, we've been doing this and Sam, we've been doing this all for a long time, right? Back when devices first got FDA approved in the late 1980s, they were kind of colloquially known as shock boxes because that was all they did. I remember having to contact the manufacturer saying, we need a defibrillator programmed at 180 beats per minute, 5 joule first shock, and then, max output after that. And they would ship the device to us. There was no programmability to it. And, patients, unfortunately, despite the advent of this new technology, suffered from frequent shocks with it and the psychological sequela of that. And it was from that ICD support groups were developed. And, there was really a need to help provide education and support to this patient population. And I think with the advent of newer device technology, so we have better algorithms, we now have anti-tachycardia pacing that provides pain-free therapy for patients. That kind of brings us up to contemporary times. And Sam, I'm going to shoot this first question to you. Do you think that ICD support groups are still relevant today in light of the changes in technology of devices?
Well, thanks, Julie. And as you know, as a psychologist in electrophysiology, I grew up during these same times where we were trying to figure out how are we ever going to address the needs of these patients across the border, across the world. ICD support groups arose because of the need for emotional validation and information. And patients do that as well as anybody. And support groups remain important or valuable because you have the community of people that come together, even if it's not one of these stand up and share every deepest thought. Rather, the community comes together for learning, for support, for connection, for emotional validation. And that's worth something. That's really valuable. And it's very hard to think about meeting the full needs of every mental health possibility for a population of ICD patients. But support groups are a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. I mean, it's, the peer support is so important. I think that's a valuable thing that we as healthcare providers can't necessarily provide to our patients. So allowing them to come together and be able to have shared experiences, I think is invaluable for them as well. So thank you. Anne, you have run a support group for over 2 decades in Sydney, Australia. Can you tell us a little bit about your support group, kind of where it started and kind of where it's evolved to?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Sam said, things have, or as you said, things have evolved, but I've always worked in cardiac rehabilitation for over 20 years, and it became very clear, and as you say, back in the day, they were known as a shock box. So that these patients had specific needs, they had specific challenges, and it was not provided, although we always encourage these patients to come to cardiac rehab, it just wasn't specific enough for their needs. So it evolved with that realization that we need more specific education, they need more support. But there weren't a huge number of patients in that stage. So we started small. We started back in 1998. And I don't know quite how I stumbled across Sam's resources and the research he'd done, but that was invaluable because there was very little known out sort of then. And I also didn't really feel that I was an expert in the field by any means. So we started small and we ran education sessions specific to ICD patients. But at the same time, we'd encourage them to come to cardiac rehab because the education sessions we run were 4 times a year. And that wasn't really enough for that sort of that support. That one-off session wasn't really enough. It's evolved, and with the advent of obviously COVID, it sort of ushered in that option to deliver perhaps online education, which also was a huge benefit for the, Australia's a big country, for the rural areas. They could access the information, they could jump online. Some patients actually prefer that anonymity. They don't want to come to a support group. They don't want to share their story, but they do want the information. So it's kind of worked both ways. We've got the face-to-face, but we've also now, because of COVID, fast-tracked online education. But the other thing we did over the years was it's evolved, and it's sort of, I suppose, based on input from the patients themselves, as we developed a young ICD subset. So group called the Young ICD Network, which kind of we focused more on perhaps specific needs that they may have, such as family planning, information about genetics, sexual intimacy, those sorts of things, returning to sport. So we had that little subset, and then they actually initiated their own Facebook site. So, digital technology has certainly widened the net. It meant we could also ask Sam to speak, which is great. We had international speakers. People could jump in from, as I say, rural areas. The sessions are recorded, so even if patients can't attend, and also the rural sector can actually take the recordings and have their own little group with the expertise that we've managed to sort of draw in from various speakers. So I still think it's really valuable. These patients are still living with heart disease and potentially a life-threatening arrhythmia. And also, if they get a shock, they kind of take a step back. As I think Sam has made various comments, that they need that constant sort of support or access to that support if required. So, yeah, it's been an incredible journey for me. I've met some amazing people, but I think there's definitely a need, but it's not always possible for every hospital to offer that kind of service.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that we do have, with the advent of social media, that patients are better connected, and, several kind of patient-run groups have developed. We have a group in the area called the Defibrillators. So, you talked a little bit about kind of more specific subgroups of patients that, the younger people may have different needs than the older patient population with defibrillators. So Tiffany, I'm going to turn to you now. You just did a reboot of the support group at the Brigham, and you have kind of a hybrid approach. Could you tell our audience a little bit about the group that you and Lauren Rousseau run together?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much, Julie, for the invitation. And it's such a pleasure to be on here with both Anne and Sam and you, of course. I think as Julie mentioned, it's typically myself and my colleague Lauren Rousseau who started this back in November of 2022. And that was our first launch date. And we were just inspired by hearing patient stories. And being on the inpatient side, I think we were starting to realize that beyond being present at the time of their discharge, we weren't really doing them a service in terms of connecting them with other people who perhaps were part of the situation before or had a similar story. But then we were just leaving them out to the dust to the, regularly scheduled follow-ups that really would just talk about the medical things, but had no input or no insight to provide them in regards to the mental health component of living with a device. And a lot of them fell into two categories. Certainly there were genetic and familial cardiomyopathies, but then there were also patients who no one in their family had ever experienced something like this before. So I think we were trying to gauge how can we be helpful in that regard. And Lauren and myself both have patient stories and anecdotes that really inspired us to get this off the ground. And we're so thankful for Julie, who did it at the Brigham a long time ago, certainly in different times and with different challenges, but being able to reignite and and Sam really inspiring us to take it head honcho and recruit patient speakers as well as themselves to really recruit folks to attend. And the virtual model we thought would be best because certainly it was during the pandemic and also allowed us the opportunity to have patients meet in person if they so choose, but then also give them the option, knowing that Boston can be difficult to access for some of our patients, to attend virtually. And so we actually ended up serving our Epic system for patients who had been identified with ICDs and using that as a way to recruit patients. But then we also used the networks of, again, Dr. Sears. We at the first time had invited Omar Carter, and he was able to recruit some of his networks as well to hopefully get patients to attend. So we've been running it as a hybrid model ever since, where typically we have a patient speaker who starts off the talk. We've also had Lizzie Simon, and now our next session is actually this Thursday, where we're inviting two sisters who have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and both have ICDs, and they're going to give their shared story about how it's been. And they have different types of devices, so it's been really interesting to see their story, and we found them on social media. So again, to comment on the advent of technology, it's really allowed us to connect with people who perhaps are not in state or, our own patients. But nonetheless, I think, we do offer that introduction with the patient speaker, and then we break out into breakout sessions that typically have themes. So we've had instances where it may surround mental health, and we've been able to recruit our psychiatry department, and specifically we have a cardiac psychiatrist who's been involved in managing that session. But then we've also had providers as well as device reps who are present for the other discussions around whatever patients have noted as something they want to chat about. And so we do a Zoom session, but then we also have a live session concurrently, and patients get to choose two breakout sessions, both of about 20 to 25 minutes in duration. And then we come together after the breakout sessions to have a general group discussion. And that usually is fueled by patients, really any questions that they had or any comments or things that they still have concerns about. Is really that opportunity comes together to provide that forum to do so. And then we close the session, and we found that patients really enjoy it. And we typically send out a survey to see what we can do better the next time. It typically involves other topics, or, whether they felt the breakout sessions were appropriate in duration, or if it should be longer, who should be the next folks that are up to speak. So we really try to take patient input and make sure that they're getting the most value out of the program. So I think we've now run 3 programs so far, and we host them quarterly. And I think it's been a good amount of time just to let people kind of assess the situation, and then, hopefully invite their friends or family or other folks who are in their networks to join.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. And I did want to also highlight one of the things that I've noticed that you and Lauren are doing, which is some diversity and inclusion outreach. So trying to reach patients who may not have English as their first language, maybe Spanish-speaking patients, that when you send the notice out in Epic to the patients, that you do include it in Spanish, and that we have enlisted some of our Spanish-speaking physicians to run a breakout session, so that which I think is great, being able to, it's such a challenge trying to meet the needs of our underserved populations. And I think this is a great first step. So kudos on that.
Yeah, thanks.
So Anne and Tiffany, I'll open this both up to you in terms of what would you recommend to people interested in starting up a support group at their center? Anne, you want to kick off first?
Yeah. Look, I think you have to be led by, in some ways, the participants, the patients. Keep it small, start simple, because, you kind of are led by, I've very much been led by the people, the members of the group, who've said to me what they want to hear, whether they want it online or face-to-face. And, just kind of, actually, if you can set up a bit of a group that I often talk to, I've got a couple of go-to people who are really good, they're really active in the group, and just to ask their opinion and see what's going to work for them, because essentially you're doing it for the patient, so it needs to be built up around what their needs are, and kind of go with the flow. I don't know how Tiffany's found, how you develop, because your group sounds really amazing. I love the idea of breakout groups. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, no, I agree with Anne 100%, where we're letting the patients drive the conversation. So although they're breakout sessions, we typically have moderators present, but that's just for a formality and really to help guide the conversation if it dies down. But really the patients are driving most of the conversation. And I would echo that it should be patient focused, and that may be hard to identify. So for us, we actually didn't know what patients wanted. And so that may require you sending a survey to your patients and assessing what their needs are and what they'd want to talk about, if they'd want to talk about it at all, and whether or not that's in person or virtual, or if, and to what schedule, right? We didn't know if we should offer it monthly or, quarterly, annually. So we were able to ascertain that information from our patient population by doing a survey. So that really weighed into the structure that we ultimately developed. And I would say the other thing is, don't be afraid to reach out to the folks who've done it before, because it can be such a time-consuming process. And trying to figure out what's most effective for your particular institution may vary. But I think it's definitely worth reaching out to your networks, and I'm happy to serve as a liaison for that too, just for people to be able to start it, because I think this would benefit all patients, and obviously even attending our virtual sessions, that could be a way to just see what the structure is like and then kind of go from there. So happy to share resources too going forward if that's something people are interested in.
Great. Well, one of the things, Sam, I'm going to turn back to you real quick as we finish up here. Both Anne and Tiffany have mentioned you as a mentor in helping with support groups. You've really been the driving force behind all of this for several decades now. And, I just think about how many patients that you have helped. And I think collectively as a group really appreciate all the work that you and your group have done. Not everybody has a Sam Sears at their facility. Tiffany's got a cardiac psychologist, but what do you recommend to providers that may not have someone that they can reach out to?
Well, I have a couple things to say about this. First, the vision of a support group is really that we want our patients not to just survive, but we want them to thrive, right? So support groups are a supplement to care. And that's the first idea. So having a physician or an allied health professional champion that says, this matters. These outcomes in terms of patients returning to a confident, active lifestyle that's informed and engaged is a goal we have for this clinic. And patients who come to my clinic, that's something we want to achieve. That's first, and having some goal there. Then we get to these execution points where we have leaders like each of you who not just hear that call or make that call, but then direct how to fill that need. So I think the support group idea is the more universal response. Now, in terms of having a Sam Sears, having a psychologist there, those are cultivated. So helping mental health professionals know they are needed and wanted, and cultivating that relationship. Because I don't know, psychiatrists, psychologists kind of, they park in the back of the lot, keep them in the dark some days, barely let them wander the halls. So if you let them out and say, hey, we have free coffee, I mean, they may come. And if they come, then you engage them and show them the tremendous need, the tremendous value and opportunity that cardiac clinics and our ICD patients in particular provide them. And so it does require some nurturing, because otherwise psychiatrists, psychologists are busy with their own regular duties. And this becomes something that could be really a true catalytic conversion for a clinic and for a mental health team and a cardiology team and for our patients. So I kind of see the idea that everybody brings their strengths, and together the strengths are magnified. It's a force multiplier.
Thank you, Sam, for your comments. And thank you, Anne. Thank you, Tiffany, for sharing your experiences with your ICD support groups. This is Julie Shea for Heart Rhythm TV. Thank you for watching, and please follow us on our YouTube channel.